What's up, guys? Chris here, back again with Tight Lines, and this is another episode of Friday Night Neuro. Thanks so much for coming back. We're continuing to grow the channel, so thank you so much to all the new subscribers. This is, for those that may not know, this is the weekly session that we do talking about a neuroscience topic. So I am a third-year PhD student at Delaware State University. I am working on mechanisms of neurodegeneration, specifically, trying to understand how astrocytes play into that. And I'm looking forward to sharing tonight a topic that I think is very important. So one of the things in my own research that we're looking at is we're seeing that there are sex differences in the way that the brain functions, that the body biologically, we know that from a biological perspective, you are biologically born as a male or a female. What people may not understand is that regardless of how you may feel in that brain, regardless of how you may feel in overall, you may feel that you're supposed to be a male and you were born a female, or vice versa. And we know that those things can happen in utero. But what's important to also understand is that there's a lot of other pieces and parts that are involved. So, from a health perspective, I think it's really important for people to understand that there are sex differences, that affect us on a cellular level and a molecular level. We do have certain things that we've looked at, so anxiety, depression, neurodegenerative diseases, stress responses. All of these things can be affected differently based on whether you were born as a male or a female. And even when you're taking hormone therapy, one way or the other, that's actually just adding in one more piece. But the reality is that your body was still exposed to the opposite in those cases. So it's really important. One of the things I try to make sure I educate on is, whatever you want to be referred to as, so whatever pronouns you choose to use, I know that's a big topic right now. But from a biological perspective, that is not as important. When you look at it from a medical perspective, from a scientific perspective, the biological sex is super important. So what I will say in regards to this topic is that everything I'm going to share here is based on the idea that biologically you were born either a male or a female. And you need to make sure, consider this a PSA, please make sure that you are educating yourself so that you know that there are differences, and then make sure that you're sharing that with your doctor, that you're very open about that with your doctor. That's a private matter, but I'm just suggesting that because that does change how you could potentially be either more or less likely to get a specific disease or disorder, and it could affect the way that they need to treat you. So something to think about. Now, that being said, some of the interesting things that I've seen is that, for instance, the areas of the brain that deal with stress are the amygdala, which is kind of deep inside the midbrain there, and then the hippocampus, right? So this is, again, very deep in the middle of the brain. But these are important areas, and the way that they're affected by stress, the way that they're affected from a neurodegenerative perspective, can be connected with sex. And so, one of the most interesting things that I've looked at over the last few years is that stress response. So the body responds differently to stress, whether you're male or female, especially based on whether you have testicles, whether you have ovaries. They produce different hormones. So even if you're born a male and then you take estrogen, or you're born a female and then you take testosterone or progesterone, whatever the case is, these chemicals, men produce estrogen the same way that women do. We just produce it in a lot less. So it's not that it's not present. When you start changing these things, that's also going to change how you respond to certain things. However, your cells are also pre-programmed with a certain amount of, I'm supposed to do this, right? So that's the way that biology works, is that there's this kind of, my cells are built to respond in a certain way. So you may see that. So one of the interesting things is, as men get older, they have a lot more of the stress hormone. So you may or may not have heard of this. It's called cortisol. And cortisol is all throughout your body when you stress. The purpose of cortisol is to prepare your body for fight or flight, right? So it's going to try to hold on to energy from the body and say, I've got to hold on to these stores so that I'm prepared for when this big saber-toothed tiger attacks. And then I can use that to either run away and have the energy I need for that, or I can fight and I have the energy for that. The problem is that today, one of the things, and this is just generally for stress, we never actually get to that point that we burn that energy. So when we sit there and we're stressing at our desk, or we're sitting and stressing in a meeting, in those cases, we're still having the same biological response. It doesn't stop. What's interesting, though, is that even though we have that biological response, and we know that that's happening, that's a guarantee that's what's happening. But what's fascinating is that once we have that stress response and we don't burn it, then what happens, right? Well, it turns out that that's what leads to fat depositions, right? Because the body says, well, I saved up all these calories, I saved up all this energy, and I didn't use them. They've got to go somewhere. So then it holds on to it and says, oh, well, we didn't spend it yet, so we've got to be prepared for the next one. And this keeps happening over and over again. In addition, it's important to understand that men and women will respond differently biologically to stress. So this cortisol in younger men and women, the free cortisol that's available is about the same. But as you get older, men actually end up having a higher rate of this free cortisol in their system. What's interesting, though, is even without considering this stress hormone of cortisol, we think about the main factor that runs the stress system is this thing called the HPA axis. It stands for hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, right? So it's the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal gland that all function together, and they connect with each other and communicate with each other. So when you have a stressful event, they trigger a lot of different things in the body. What's interesting is from a biological perspective, that response is going to be different for males versus females. There are certain things that the body will respond differently to. So, these are things that from a medical perspective and from a biological perspective give us a really good understanding that there's a lot of differences that we have to be aware of. This further plays into neurodegeneration, being susceptible to certain diseases, more or less depending on the sex. And then also treatments. It also contributes to depression, anxiety. All of these types of things are different between males and females. So, it could be that you're dealing with, a man and a woman side by side are both dealing with depression, and it may look and feel very different. Same thing with anxiety. Same thing with dealing with any other stress, work stress, social stress, familial stress. All of these different things are going to be very different, and they're going to be experienced very different. There is individual difference as well, but there are generalities that can, for the most part, we can kind of start to place certain things and say, okay, generally men feel this way or react this way or their body responds this way, and females is generally this way. It doesn't mean that it's 100%. It doesn't mean that there's no individual difference, so I just want to clarify that. I'm not stating that it's 100% just whatever group you're in. But I think that there are things that the general public should educate themselves on about how there are differences, right? So some of these things, there's somatostatin. That's going to be it's one chemical in the body that can be very different between men and women. I already talked about cortisol, and there's another chemical in the body called corticotropin releasing hormone, and so that's involved, and that can be differences, or corticotropin releasing factor. So other things that can be affected include your heart, your lungs, your kidneys. So anything in your body can be affected by this increase in stress, and the difference in the biological effect based on being a man, a biological male, or a biological female. So these are really amazing when you look at all of the results that we've seen over the years of how this can be affected. There's things that potentially can be developmental, so meaning that they happen for females as they develop, but not for males, and vice versa. So it's not a clear picture of exactly how every single person is going to be affected, but it is important to understand that there are sex differences, and being able to recognize that and understand that it could be from colon health to mental health to neurological health. All of these things do have a biological sex connection. So I think it's really important to remember that, to recognize that, and hopefully, in the end, if you are aware of this, you make your doctor aware of this, it leads to better health for everybody, it makes the outcomes a lot better, and realistically, hopefully, it allows for the best treatment possible, and really, if you're interested in your health, it's important to understand how men versus women, how medications affect them, how stress affects them, how other things can affect, because each of those pieces is going to determine little bits about, how your experience is going to be with any either age-related or disease-related type of outcomes. So certainly you want to make sure that we're taking that into account. It's not as simple as just saying you have this or you don't have that. It has to be very specific about what have you been through and how has that changed how your body is going to respond to things. So hopefully this is helpful, but I encourage you to check out research on your own if you have questions, if you want any kinds of references. I think that's something that everybody should be taking time to learn a little bit about. We all have to take some responsibility for our own health, and part of that is understanding how our body is being affected by the environment and how it affects other things within your body, right? So how does your body affect your body, right? That's believe it or not, that's a big piece. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you'll subscribe, smash the like button, hit the bell so that you get notified when we have new episodes. I hope you guys stay tuned. We have coming up in the next probably week or two, have something big coming up, so keep an eye out for that. I think you guys are going to really like it. I'm excited about it. I can't wait to get involved with it. And I really hope that you guys are seeing things are continuing to improve. We got some new lighting. Hopefully the sound and the picture is better. Kind of set up a new space here. Got things a little bit better set up. So little bit by little bit, we're going to keep improving. And, like I said, once we get to 50 subscribers, we're going to do a giveaway. And so I really hope that you guys will keep coming back, that you'll invite your friends, you'll put the word out. Hopefully we'll continue to grow this thing together and make it make it more interesting, make it more fun. And I really hope that you guys will get involved. Put down in the comments, let me know what kinds of things you're interested in. Do you like the way that we're doing things? Is there something else I can do different, do it better? I want to continue to improve. And hopefully, we'll continue to just make this even better each time. So, as always, thank you so much for giving some of your time and for coming and sitting with me. I genuinely appreciate that, and keep coming back. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time. Tight lines.